In December 2025, the United States issued a formal proclamation that changed how entry into the country is handled. That proclamation took effect on January 1, 2026. Under this policy, entry and visa issuance for nationals of certain countries are fully or partially restricted. According to official documents, a total of 39 countries are affected by these rules. 19 of those countries face broad restrictions covering both immigrant and non-immigrant visas. The remaining 20 countries are subject to limits on immigrant visas and selected non-immigrant categories. Those restricted non-immigrant visas include B visas used for tourism and business travel. They also include F, M, and J visas tied to academic study, vocational training, and exchange programs. This is not a border action enforced at airport checkpoints. The restriction operates earlier in the process, at the visa issuance stage, where eligibility and approval standards are applied. In other words, the change determines who can apply and be approved before travel even begins. Not every type of movement is treated the same under this policy. Travel connected to diplomatic or official public missions is separated under explicit exception provisions. What has changed is the access available for civilian travel tied to tourism, education, training, and short-term professional activity. This marks a clear shift in how the United States regulates entry through its visa system. The question now is why the United States chose to take this step, and how a change in entry rules like this could affect the U.S. economy. To understand that, we first need to look at the background behind this decision. According to the proclamation itself and explanations released by the U.S. government, the reasoning behind this policy is framed in administrative and security terms. The documents repeatedly point to concerns around national security, identity verification, document reliability, information sharing, and compliance with visa and stay rules. These are not references to a single incident or a recent crisis. The focus is structural and long-term. U.S. authorities describe ongoing challenges in managing visas for certain countries, especially after visas are issued rather than at the point of entry. Those challenges include higher administrative workload, weaker data verification systems, limited information sharing, and difficulties enforcing overstay and compliance rules. From the government's perspective, these issues translate into rising long-term management costs and greater uncertainty across the visa system. Managing entry is not just about approving applications, but about tracking, enforcement, and compliance over time. This helps explain why the policy is applied at the front end of the process, during visa review and approval, instead of later at airports or border checkpoints. In official language, the stated goal is to reduce risk before entry happens, rather than responding after problems appear. That framing matters. It suggests the policy is driven by cost, capacity, and risk assessment within the immigration system, not by short-term political pressure or a single triggering event. As a result, the adjustment is not centered on nationality alone. It is designed to operate through visa categories and types of movement that generate higher monitoring and enforcement burdens. In other words, this is presented as an administrative decision about how the United States manages entry at scale. So the next question is simple. How could this policy affect the U.S. economy? The first impact appears where people move, because that is where the economic connection begins in the most direct way. Tourism, business travel, study, training, and short-term professional visits are often talked about as travel, but from the U.S. perspective, they function as service exports that bring foreign money directly into the domestic economy. When international visitors enter the United States, spending begins almost immediately across multiple sectors. Airlines sell seats, hotels fill rooms, restaurants and transportation services see higher daily volume, and local retail and service businesses absorb that spending in real time. This makes cross-border movement one of the fastest channels through which foreign dollars enter the U.S. economy. When movement slows, that flow slows with it. The impact does not begin in quarterly GDP data or national statistics, but shows up earlier in reservation numbers, booking trends, and day-to-day revenue. Canceled flights, lower hotel occupancy, fewer restaurant customers, and reduced work hours are often the first visible signs. This does not mean industries stop overnight or that demand collapses all at once. The adjustment is usually gradual, but it is measurable, especially for businesses that depend on volume rather than margins. Even small declines in visitor numbers can matter when costs are fixed and staffing levels are set in advance. Cities with a large share of international flights tend to feel this shift sooner than others, as do regions where tourism and short-term visitors play a central role in local demand. In those places, travel volume is not an abstract metric, but something tied directly to payroll, rent payments, and operating cash flow. A single trip that does not happen may not change much on its own, but when many trips disappear over time, the effects begin to compound across service jobs and local businesses. These changes often start quietly and locally, well before they become visible in national economic data. But short-term visits are only part of the story. The larger and more persistent economic effects tend to come from people who stay longer. Education and training involve long-term stays, and for that reason, they are one of the most reliable pillars of U.S. service exports because they bring foreign spending into the economy in a steady and predictable way. International students and trainees do not just visit for a short period and leave. They move into local communities and become part of the day-to-day economic flow. They pay tuition, but that is only the starting point of their economic footprint. Over time, they rent apartments, use public transportation, buy groceries, eat out, and pay for a wide range of local services. Their spending does not come in spikes tied to holidays or events. It arrives consistently, month after month. In many college towns, this creates a stable layer of demand that local businesses quietly rely on. Landlords plan around it. Retailers and service providers expect it. City budgets and employment patterns adjust to it over time. This is why education-related movement has long been treated as a dependable economic base rather than a volatile one. When movement in this group is reduced, the impact does not stay inside classrooms or campus buildings. University finances can begin to feel pressure, especially in institutions where international enrollment plays a meaningful role in balancing budgets. But the effects do not stop at campus boundaries. Rental markets around universities can soften as fewer long-term tenants enter the area. Local restaurants, stores, and service jobs that depend on steady student traffic may see slower turnover and weaker daily volume. What starts as a change in enrollment gradually moves outward, from academic institutions into the surrounding community. This is what makes education-related movement different from short-term travel. It supports local economies continuously, not occasionally. When that flow is disrupted, the adjustment tends to be broader, slower, and more persistent than changes tied to tourism alone. At this point, the impact goes beyond individual spending and starts to affect how businesses operate and plan over the long term. For companies, restrictions on travel and training are no longer just an external policy issue. They become an internal operational problem. For many firms, business travel and training are not optional extras that can simply be paused without consequence. They are part of how projects move forward, how teams are built, and how operations stay coordinated across borders. When that movement becomes less predictable or harder to plan, companies are forced to adjust how they operate. One of the most common adjustments is substitution. Firms may need to hire temporary staff, shift responsibilities to existing employees, or rely more heavily on remote coordination. Each of these options comes with trade-offs. They can raise labor costs, slow down decision-making, or reduce efficiency in ways that are not immediately visible. Delays add another layer of cost. Meetings take longer to arrange, site visits are postponed, and projects move more slowly from one stage to the next. In industries where timing matters, even small delays can compound over time. Those delays can ripple outward, affecting supply chains, client relationships, and delivery schedules. There is also a compliance layer that grows quietly in the background. Changes in visa availability and travel rules increase the need for legal review, human resources oversight, and internal coordination. More time is spent checking eligibility, adjusting plans, and managing risk. These are not headline-grabbing expenses, but they accumulate steadily across large organizations. Importantly, these costs rarely appear all at once or in a single line item. They are spread across productivity, pricing decisions, and long-term planning. Over time, they influence how companies allocate resources, manage risk, and decide where and how to operate. And this is not where the effects stop. When companies change how they hire, train, and deploy workers, those adjustments do not stay inside individual firms. They begin to show up in the labor market itself. some sectors are more exposed than others. Industries with a higher share of foreign workers tend to feel the impact of movement restrictions more directly. Healthcare, caregiving, certain technical roles, and agriculture all rely on labor that often crosses borders through structured visa pathways. When that supply becomes less flexible, employers have fewer options. They may need to compete more aggressively for available workers, which can put upward pressure on wages. In some cases, firms respond by changing job requirements, shifting schedules, or accelerating automation where possible. Hiring structures can change as well. Positions that were once filled through international pipelines may stay open longer or be redesigned to fit domestic labor availability. Training timelines can stretch, and productivity can be affected during the transition. These adjustments are not uniform. The degree to which workers and employers feel the change depends heavily on location and industry. Regions with concentrated demand in healthcare, agriculture, or specialized technical work may experience tighter labor conditions sooner than others. Over time, these shifts can influence how labor is priced, how work is organized, and how quickly different sectors adapt. What begins as a policy-affecting movement can end up reshaping parts of the labor market in uneven but meaningful ways. So the real question now is what this shift in movement policy actually leaves behind for the U.S. economy. This is not simply a travel restriction or a temporary adjustment to visa rules. It reflects a reassessment of how much the U.S. economy gains from the movement of people and how much it spends to manage that movement. For years, money tied to tourism, education, training, and business travel has flowed steadily into the United States. That flow supported airlines, universities, local service businesses, and regional labor markets, operating quietly as part of everyday economic activity. At the same time, managing that movement required monitoring, enforcement, and administration. Those systems carried growing costs as administrative workload increased, enforcement became more complex, and uncertainty accumulated alongside the benefits. This policy represents an effort to adjust that balance. It does not eliminate movement, but reduces it in exchange for lower management risk and greater predictability, shifting the focus away from volume and toward cost and capacity. The impact of that choice does not appear all at once. It unfolds gradually as fewer trips take place, fewer long-term stays materialize, and organizations adjust how they operate. These changes tend to surface first at the edges of the economy before they register in national statistics. Airlines, universities, corporate operations, and local employment are likely to feel small shifts early on. Individually, those shifts may seem limited, but over time they accumulate. As the adjustment continues, the distribution of costs becomes clearer across industries and regions. Some feel the effects sooner, others more slowly. In that sense, the United States is not choosing between openness and isolation. It is reshaping its connections in pursuit of long-term economic stability and lower systemic risk. The real consequences will be measured not in policy language, but in how the economy adjusts over time.